Welcome back, All in Soul fans. Today we've got a really fun dish we're gonna make. We're gonna make an amazing ramen, but the main star of this dish is gonna be Chashu pork. Chashu pork is an absolutely amazing dish. These little slices, when we're done of this pork, are gonna be tasty morsels that people aren't gonna be able to get enough of. But I did say it's a long process, and let me talk to you about a few of the ingredients we need to get together before we start this. So we're gonna use some mirin, some soy sauce, and some sake. And then we're gonna use some sugar, some garlic cloves, some shallot, and some chives that we just picked from our garden. We're gonna use about a 2-pound piece of pork belly. And then we're gonna use twine to tie it up in a nice cylindrical piece so we can sear it before we get it into our marinade for several hours. So let's get into it. So the first step of this is to get our pork tied up. So you wanna roll it as tightly as you can. And that's about as tight as I can get this piece. And I am completely terrible at this, but we'll see. We'll see if we can do some nice tight ties on it. Yeah, that works. Yeah, and then what this will do is this will help us keep it together as it cooks for several hours. Because if you don't tie it up, what's gonna happen is it's all gonna kind of fall apart. You're not gonna be able to get a good sear and roll it around in the pan like you otherwise would. And then once it's braising, it might just come apart and not be very appealing or tasty when it's done. And then when we're finished, what's gonna allow us to do is get nice slender cuts on the meat that stay in that nice round form that you normally see in ramen dishes. All right, we're getting pretty close. We're gonna finish tying this up, and then we're gonna get this in the pan and we're gonna sear it a little bit, and we'll give you a close-up video of how that looks once we sear it. All right, it took a little bit of work, but we got our pork belly nice and tied up. Looks like a little bit of a small porchetta or something like that. Next step is we're gonna get into the pan and we're gonna sear it. But before we do that, we're just gonna talk about a couple of our veggies that we're gonna cook with this. So we've got some garlic cloves here. We've got 6 of them. We're just gonna give these kind of a chop in half because they're gonna go in the marinating liquid. We'll get those back in. And then we're gonna take our shallot, and all we're gonna do is just cut it in half, and we're gonna leave the skin on. We also have our chives here, and we're just gonna leave those rough chopped. They don't have to be anything special. We don't need to chop them up small. All right, let's get over to the pan and let's get this piece of pork seared up. We're gonna do this similar to the way we did our beef barbacoa a couple weeks ago. We're gonna get the pan really warm, really hot. We're gonna drop the pork in and we're gonna let it sit for about a minute on each side and make sure we get a really nice sear and really nice char on the outside of this pork belly. Our pan's starting to smoke, so it's time to put our pork belly in. And we're gonna let this sit for about a minute. We're gonna do a little less time here than we did on our barbacoa because there's a lot of fat in this cut. And I wanna make sure it doesn't burn. We can always go back in for another sear later if we didn't get enough the first turn. We let it go for a minute. We're gonna check on it. Really nice browning. Really, really nice browning. We're gonna keep turning and we're gonna do every side the same way, a minute at a time. All right, we're gonna check this side really quickly. Great, really nice Maillard reaction. Gonna keep going on the rest of our sides. We can see our pan's getting pretty hot. If you got a fan, you may wanna turn it on to get the smoke out of the kitchen. We're just gonna let ours roll so we don't mess up the sound on our footage. Yeah, we're browning really nicely now. As you saw in the video, we got a really nice brown on our pork belly, and now we're ready to make the marinating liquid that it's gonna sit in, and we're gonna braise it in the oven for a little while. If you haven't done so yet, turn your oven on to 275 degrees And we're gonna put it in the oven once the liquid is made. So now we're gonna get back over to the stovetop and we're gonna show you how we make the marinade. Like I said, we're gonna put sake, we're gonna put soy sauce, we're gonna put some mirin, sugar, shallot, chive, and garlic in it. But we'll show you as we add all those ingredients over at the stovetop. So come on, let's go. So we're about to make this umami bomb of a sauce. I've got my eye on kind of medium-high heat to warm up. We don't want it to get too hot. If it gets too hot, you run the risk of burning some of the sugar in here. So we're gonna start with 1 cup of sake. Doesn't really matter what kind of sake you use because we're gonna cook it down. We're gonna do 1/2 cup of soy sauce. And a full cup of mirin. And now we're gonna add our dry ingredients. We'll start with 1/2 cup of sugar. We've got 1 whole shallot here with the skin on, just cut in half. And add that. We've got some really nice fresh leeks from our garden, rough chopped. We'll throw those in. And then we've got 6 cloves of garlic with the skin on, cut in half. And what we're gonna do is bring this up to temp. We're gonna bring it up to boil. And we're gonna get all the flavors to meld and the sugar to dissolve. We're gonna let this warm up. The other thing that we're gonna add in some of that pork fat we rendered when we cooked our pork. All right, now we'll let this sit, let the sugar dissolve with the heat. And once that happens, we'll get our pork in. Our marinating liquid has started to boil, so we're just gonna put our pork in. It's not gonna be submerged. And we're just gonna put the top on and we're gonna leave it crack just a tiny bit. So depending on what kind of pot you use, you may wanna be careful. The handles may be pretty hot. Mine are warm on one side. But like I said, we've got our oven preheated to 275 degrees. We're gonna put this on a lower rack. We're gonna let this braise for 3 to 4 hours. And the way you can usually tell is you can use a probe or potentially even a fork or a toothpick. It's gotta be tender so that the probe goes through the meat really easily. And once you're able to do that, you know the meat's ready. So we'll check back in here in a few hours once this is ready, and we'll show you the next step, which is just gonna be pretty simple. We're gonna refrigerate it overnight, and then tomorrow we'll be ready to slice it up, sear it, and put it in our wonderful ramen. We're about 2 hours in. We're gonna just do a quick check of the meat. This is a probe that I'll typically use. I don't check temperature when I'm doing this. This is literally just to see how easily the probe will go through the meat. Our marinade's still boiling, and then we just wanna check this. And it's sliding in nicely, but it's still not quite where I want it to be. You want it to go through pretty easily. So we're gonna let that go for another hour or so. All right guys, so as you saw, pork's looking great. We're right on track. We got maybe another hour of cooking in here, and then we're gonna get out, get it in the fridge, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
1 hour later.
Well, and soul fans, we're at the end of our journey for Chashu pork. We got one last thing to do. We're gonna slice this up into some thin slices, and then we're gonna get it warmed up for our ramen. There are lots of ways you can do it in the oven, in the broth. To be honest, if I got the chance to use fire, that's what I'm going with. All right, so we're just gonna cut a couple of thin slices. Usually per bowl, you wanna put 2 to 3 pieces of this in each bowl. So now that we've got them sliced up, we'll get them on our tray table and we'll put some flame on them. What we're looking for here, fans, is just a nice char on the outside. We don't wanna get the flame too close or we're gonna have too much of a bitter flavor on it. So keep it back and let's get a nice char on this pork. We're gonna go in with our pork. We're gonna put our 3 slices in here. We're gonna put our marinated egg in that's still nice and runny in the center. And we're gonna garnish with a little bit of green onion. It's wild how when I make tasty food, these kids just show up all over the place. Fans, we appreciate you joining our multi-day journey on Chashu pork. We're gonna do a separate video on how to make ramen from scratch because that's a whole different in-depth process. But for now, we'll see you next week with more fun cooking videos.
Bye.
If you like this video, join Oil and Soul for more family-friendly cooking content. Bye.
Wait, look at my hand. Dad, look at my hand. Wait, Dad, look at my hand.
I see it.